So first off, I wanted to have a look at the typical AV business. And obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but for today's purpose, we're going to be focusing on the majority of operators out there. So typically, staff sizes are usually well under sort of 25 people. On the integrator side of things, we've got a couple of sales guys, a couple of project managers, a couple of technical engineers and programmers, a team of installers, and maybe someone in admin. On the distribution side, we've got a couple of account managers, some product managers, a couple in procurement, and our logistics guys. Now, in the typical AV industry, on the marketing front, most of you probably have very limited marketing resources. You're probably relying mainly on word of mouth or grinding out sales activity to win business. And if you do have a marketing function, in most cases, I find that you're probably relying on email, trade events, and I still see people putting ads out in trade magazines. On the human resources front, the vast majority of you won't have a designated role here. At best, we'll have an HR document that we're presented to sign at the beginning of our employment. Now, I understand that from an HR perspective, these aren't necessarily industry problems, they're sort of small business problems, but that's where the majority of us lie. On the professional development side of things, because we don't have a standardized pathway into the industry, the majority of professional development opportunities are either going to come from the vendor or the distributor. And quite frankly, that's not necessarily focusing on the fundamentals of AV and leaves even less opportunity for sales training more broadly. So if we have a look into the pathways into our industry, how many of you, raise your hands, would you say that you just fell into it, right? Let's face it, the majority of people in this industry have come from their love of live music. Most of them started in the production field and made their way to the commercial sector when they decided they'd had enough of the late nights in the production land. Most probably wouldn't have even heard of the commercial sector when they started their career. The problem is that A, the production industry is in trouble at the moment. Festivals are going bust. The smaller guys are taking on thoroughbred staff, leaving less opportunities for the young guys. And this has crippled the traditional pathways for our industry. B, we've relied too heavily on the production sector for professional development. This is where most of us learnt the overall picture of AV, signal flow, rigging, audio dispersion, programming, display protocols. And C, the industry has moved on. Networking is such a fundamental skill now, and that skill doesn't necessarily translate from the production world. So we're now faced with a problem that essentially we don't have an educated talent pool coming through into corporate land. The next problem I saw was that we have a massive self-promotion problem. For an industry that has so much technical expertise and is filled with so many creative people, we suck at self-promotion, which is a shame because so many of us do such cool things and we just don't tell anybody about it. The problem is that from a promotional perspective, we're understaffed. Our revenue is project driven and unpredictable, and we sit somewhere frustratingly between trades and the corporate sector. That's generally made any messaging that we do project to the market pretty straight laced, bland, and targeted to a certain type of business. Essentially, we haven't adapted with the times. Which brings me to my next point, competition. We're all well aware of the convergence of AV and IT. Competition has become fierce. Why? Because we're no longer just competing with each other in a siloed industry. We're competing with IT companies who are adopting technologies that we have traditionally seen as our space. The problem is that IT companies are generally way more agile. They've got an annual recurring revenue model in the back end and expertise in networking. And that has essentially given them the resources to market themselves more effectively. Now, that's not saying that our skill set is redundant, because that's definitely not the case. But we, as an industry, massively underrepresent our value in the market. And let me just remind you for a second that we're not just competing for dollars here, we're competing for talent. Which brings me to my next point, the generation gap. Now, I want to put something into perspective for you. 75% of the Australian workforce is now a millennial. Whether you see that trend in your workplace or not, it's most certainly the case for your clients and the IT sector. And you've also got to remember that Gen Z is literally entering the workforce as we speak. Now, if you took out the installers from your team, how many of you could honestly say that you needed more than one hand to count how many millennials you have on your work in your office? It's a problem. Now, if we want to win more business and attract better quality talent, we need to understand how this generation communicates. And for the majority, they're far more comfortable consuming communications and forming opinions about where they work and who they buy from on social media. And so this is where I want to propose a solution. We start speaking to our market like we're trying to attract talent. Because while I understand that the majority of you are engaged with technical people when you're selling, the vast majority of the final decision makers are not, which gives us an opportunity. So in this respect, we're both we're both educating our customers, but also getting the message out there to a talent pool that wouldn't know about the industry otherwise. This brings me to social selling. And in B2B land, the best delivery mechanism is LinkedIn. Social selling is essentially a skill set that's a synergy of sales and marketing functions, but it's sales driven. And with some small changes to our processes, it's more than suitable for small businesses. What we're doing is we're prospecting, we're communicating, we're gathering information, and we're feeding that information back to an audience through content. Now, to do this effectively, social selling requires an understanding of content, an understanding of digital communications, and an understanding of sales. The main difference here is that the content is focused on the individual's expertise rather than the business, the service, or the product. We make the employee the asset by separating ourselves from the product or services we offer and bring it back to a personal relationships level. Essentially, what we're doing is we're asking an audience of potential clients or applicants, does this person's personality and expertise make them someone I want to work with or work for? Yes, there may be elements of branding involved, the deeper that you want to get into this, but it's not required to start. The main purpose is developing the skill set is to be proactive and communicating a clear and consistent message to your market. The sales aspect comes from understanding of how we communicate digitally. There's no expectation to actually react to a piece of content, which is strange for a salesperson. So we need to proactively prospect for them. This is essentially the sales piece, right? Establishing a pseudo relationship through the content that we create and prospecting to generate quality conversations that lead to business. For the businesses that do this effectively, the talent pool out there will show itself. Now, let me just sort of articulate an example of this from a business development point of view. So let's take cold call prospecting. First off, when we're cold calling, we've identified the business we're calling as a suitable potential client. We found out who the best person to contact is and we give them a call, right? We call, we get through to the right person, and we're faced with a couple of different scenarios. Worst case scenario, it's a no, and the conversation doesn't progress at all. Probably a common case scenario, they take the call and they listen, they say, good to know, send me an email with more information. In the best case scenario, they're like, yeah, great, we've actually been thinking of doing something here, let's have a conversation. But let's be honest, the split for best case scenarios probably like under 10%, common maybe 40-50, and the other 40% never get off the ground. So now that we've had that initial conversation, we need to follow up, right? This takes multiple sales activity, sending emails, reminding myself to touch base in 3 months, which unless you've got an automated system to do that, which let's be honest, most of us in this industry don't, it all takes time. Now, to flip the script and look at social selling prospecting, we do exactly the same thing, exactly the same process. We identify a suitable business and contact, and we make the connection. The only difference is that this time we do it directly. We don't need to go through any gatekeepers. Worst case scenario, they don't accept. Common case scenario, they're going to accept, but they're not interested in anything right now. They're not going to have a conversation. And the best case scenario is that they accept, you have a good conversation and agree to a meeting, right? But in this case, all those common case scenarios that have connected, but the conversation hasn't progressed, they are all now in your immediate network. That means if you're creating content, you're going to be communicating with them every day or every week and giving them the time to get to know you and what you're all about. So by the time they come around and they want to go ahead with a project, you're now front of mind and the obvious candidate to get the job done for them. So this is how I help businesses and salespeople develop that skill set. First off, personalized skill set and strategy coaching. This is for those sales guys that want to put up their hand, lead the charge. We go through everything from establishing your value and expertise, getting your message straight, delivering your message strategically, creating efficient content, and communicating online. That's before we even get into like algorithms or optimization or anything like that. We focus on the fundamentals first. And to help you get aligned from the first, we present you with a digital persona to reference your core values, expertise, perspectives, and stories to get your messaging on point as early as possible. The second is gamified team activations. Now, this is best deployed in tandem with your selected sellers, right? And it's aimed at educating the broader team on the basics of LinkedIn and content. Essentially reinforcing and supporting your social selling initiatives. Depending on your specific strategy and your desired outcomes, we develop a bespoke game with tangible incentives to get your team engaged with some healthy competition. If you want more information about these services, let me know. I can give you a demo of the gamification program or show you our LinkedIn social selling playbook. Connect with me, Brad Ether, on LinkedIn. And if you want to catch up, talk more, by all means, book a meeting. Thank you. Cheers.